Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a book unhaul. I've got like 50 books here on the floor next to me and I've been putting this off because it's just a lot to get through. So I'm gonna kind of try and blaze through these. I'm also sorry if you hear any background noise. Everyone is home, lockdown is a thing. It's just gonna be a thing. So let's get into the books that I am going to get rid of. I'm just gonna go with the first few that are in the stack in front of me, and this might be a little bit controversial because technically this author is one that I like quite a lot. I just didn't really like this series, and it's Lifelike, Deviate and True Life by J. Christoph. I just found the character work inconsistent in the last book. I did like Lifelike and I did like Deviate enough, but I predicted everything basically in Lifelike. I don't know, the series just isn't for me. It's like a dystopian sci-fi series. It had some great moments in it, but ultimately it's just not one that I want to keep. So that is why it is going on my unhaul list. Unfortunately, J. Christoph just didn't do it for me with this series. Hopefully his Empire of a Vampire series coming out in 2021 is one that I like more. And just on that as well, I'm getting rid of Storm Dancer. I read this ages ago, gave it 3 stars, so I didn't hate it, but I don't love it and I don't plan on continuing it anyway, so it shouldn't really stick around to take up my shelf space. Unfortunately, this one is signed, but what can you do? It just has to go. Next are 2 that I talked about in a reading vlog or a wrap-up recently, and they are both by Justin Woolley. They are A City Called Smoke and A Town Called Dust. I started this one, I got 12 pages in, and the writing style just wasn't for me. They are young adult apocalyptic books, and usually those would be something that I love, but I just didn't vibe with these, so they're going. Next is Eon by Alison Goodman. I read this as well, and a lot of these actually I've read, so it's not like I'm getting rid of books that I've hauled and then just not touched. But this one, again, another 3 stars. Pretty much the same story as the others. Don't really want to continue, can't be bothered, so it's going. Next are Wildcard and Warcross, both by Mary Lou, and these are books that are young adult, they're sci-fi, and they are about virtual reality, and they were really cool at the time, but I'm not gonna ever reread these, and they were just fairly, I want to say generic, but they seemed a little bit cookie cutter when it comes to YA. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just something that I generally wouldn't revisit, so that's why I'm getting rid of these. The covers are pretty cool and the story was pretty cool, but again, I think I've outgrown them. Jumping more into Mary Lou, I'm getting rid of 2 of her other series. So the first one is the Legend trilogy, and then the next one is the Young Elites trilogy. Young Elites is a dark dystopian young adult book. It's got X-Men like powers in it, but I found the main character fairly repetitive when it came to her evilness, I guess. And then I Am Legend, it was just a good story. I know it's a retelling of the musical Les Mis, and I actually quite enjoyed it, but again, like the Wildcard duology, I've just outgrown it. So I'm getting rid of all of these as well. These were like staples in young adult when I first started reading and blogging and getting into booktube and bookstagram and book twitter, so now that I've read them I can just get rid of them. Next up is Demon Road by Derek Landy. This is very shiny. I talked about this recently in a wrap-up and a reading vlog, so I have revisited this after hauling it a long time ago. I also actually have the advanced reading copy that I got from a friend. I thought I'd love it, which is why I collected the advanced copy, but I just don't, so again, this one is going. I got 96 or 94 pages into this and just decided that I didn't like the story, I didn't like the main character, and the writing style just wasn't gelling with me. So more so it was my taste, my personal taste, rather than something that the book was particularly doing wrong that I didn't really like about this one. Next is a fairly nostalgic one for a lot of people, but it never really touched me when I was in my younger years of reading. I just didn't have it on my radar, and that's the Magicians series. I bought all of these on a friend's recommendation and I just didn't vibe with him the way that my friend did, so that's why I'm getting rid of them. I have read the first book, I tried reading the second, and then I just couldn't, and I couldn't motivate myself to read them. These were all on my March to be read pile video this year actually, and then I just never got around to them. So I think because I keep putting them off and I keep having near misses with trying to start the second book and then not actually starting the second book, that I don't actually want to read them. So that is why these are going. This used to be on my TBR shelf. It was in my exposing all of my TBR books video. It is Love Oz YA Begin and Begin. It's an anthology, a bunch of short stories. Generally I don't really read short stories, so I don't really know why I kept it, other than the fact that it is signed by all of the Aussie authors that are in here. So I loved this at the time. I was very much on the hype train for this, but I just don't think I'm ever going to read it. So I think I just need to get rid of it, because otherwise it's just going to keep clogging up my shelves. I'm sure somebody else will really like it because it's got some cool signatures in here. So I think I'm just going to send it on to the next person who will eventually love this. Next might be surprising because I actually gave this a 4 out of 5 stars when I first read it, and it's The Rivers of London. This is an adult book. It is like an urban fantasy book. It follows a guy who's a detective and he's interviewing a suspect at a murder scene, and then later on when he's talking about this person that he interviewed to his co-workers, I guess, they're like, I don't remember you interviewing anybody, and it turns out he was interviewing a ghost. So it's got supernatural elements to it, and this guy starts to become a wizard, but you can't just become a wizard. It doesn't seem that easy. You've actually got to work really, really hard to master it. So I like the magic system in here. out, but the book just lacked a lot of tension, and that's why I didn't want to continue, because if you're going to be a murder mystery book and you're not going to have a lot of tension, I don't know why I'm going to be bothered. And I actually got this from a friend because she was getting rid of it. So this is, I don't even know what book in the series this is, but it's definitely not the second one. So I don't want to go out of my way and buy the rest of the series to read this. So I'm getting rid of both of these. I didn't see this in my pile before, but this is Iona and this is the sequel to Eon. Obviously, if I'm getting rid of Eon, I'm getting rid of the sequel as well. So this duology is just making its way off my shelves. I've also got Maya and the Rising Dark. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and I talked about this, I think, in a wrap up. So any books that I talk about in a wrap up, I'll link them down below with the book name so that it's easy to find my thoughts about them, because I can't really remember why I don't want to keep this, but I know that something in the story and the way that the characters intermingled didn't really give them enough time to settle with each other. It was just like one thing after another. So because of that, I want to get rid of this, and I thought I'd love it, but that's just the way it is. It is middle grade and I love middle grade in general, but I just didn't vibe with this one, unfortunately. I want to say this next one will be a surprise, but I don't think it will be, considering a video that I recently posted of either series I'm in the middle of or series I've DNF'd. I can't remember which one this is in, but it is by Patricia Briggs. It is Nightbroken, and this is in her Mercy Thompson series. The first book is Moon Called and then Bloodbound, and those two I have read, but because of the weird pack dynamic and the weird dominance thing with the men and the vampire stuff that kind of takes away consent and has bloodlust overruling, I'm not really into this. Usually urban fantasy has a lot of those key tropes, and I used to like a lot of them, but now that I've kind of understood my reading taste, I want to try and pick and choose a little bit better. Potentially the series gets better, and I might read the third book, Iron Kissed, but honestly I doubt it. This is why I'm getting rid of this one. Also, it's a different height to the rest of the books that I've got. They're like this big instead, so if I do continue the series, then I won't be keeping this anyway. These next 3 I have already talked about in a reading wrap up or a reading vlog, probably both to be honest, because I read these for the reading rush, or rather I DNF'd them for the reading rush. The first one is The Natural Way of Things. This is supposed to be like a Handmaid's Tale-esque story set in Australia, and it kind of started with that vibe, and it has a bunch of girls, they don't know why they're drugged and how they got there, and they're doing labor for these men, and they're not in very good conditions, to be honest. And because of that tension and that dark setup, I thought I would connect more to one of the girls at the start, but I just didn't really care, and it took like 40 or 50 pages for anything to kind of start happening, and it was just very slow. So I just personally don't think this is for me, and I didn't vibe with any of the characters, which is why I'm getting rid of this one. The next one is Holding Up the Universe, and I spoke about this at length in a vlog and a wrap up, so I won't talk about it too much here. So getting rid of this one as well. Main character had the personality trait of I was fat when I was a kid, and that is it really. So it's not really enough for me to justify saying I like this book, because that's a very skin deep character flaw really. And then I've also got The Outcast, and this is a prequel book to the Novice series, so I want to try the Novice eventually at some point in the future, but this just didn't vibe with me. It had a very generic setup. The character did things that didn't make sense. It seemed like the characters were going to do stuff that was convenient for the plot rather than the characterization to inform the plot, and I don't know how to talk about that distinction, but when you read a book you can naturally tell, especially when you've read a lot of YA and adult fantasy like I have. I can kind of see the patterns now, and this is just a pattern that I don't really want to read about because I'm just not interested. I've got all my books mixed up because this is part of the Alchemist series by Michael Scott. Obviously this is the last book. I'm getting rid of the rest of the series as well, so this is just like an honorable mention because I forgot to hold it up before. Next is a series by Marissa Meyer, and I really liked her Lunar Chronicles books. Those are sci-fi retellings of fairy tales, and I like this series as well, but not enough to keep it. It is the Renegades series. I liked Renegades a lot more than the next 2 books in the series. So Renegades is about this world where people have superpowers, and obviously there are villains and there are superheroes. The superheroes are the ruling class, and then the villains obviously are not. There was like a war between both that happened about 10 years ago, and Nova, the main character, kind of gets stuck in the middle because the guy that got killed in this war, who was like the figurehead of the villains, is her uncle, and he saved her when the heroes didn't. So she has this whole moral thing going on when she tries to infiltrate the heroes and expose them and get revenge, and so that's what this series is about. It's very much about her trying to keep her secrets and forming relationships with hero characters, and while I like that morality, I don't think it delved deep enough into it for me, and the second book just seemed like a reiteration of the first book in terms of themes and character. It didn't really go anywhere, and then the last book book. While the secrets and stuff were cool, it just didn't have the payoff that I wanted. So it just took a long time for Nova to realize things. And I think that's why I was a bit dissatisfied with this series. I gave the first book 4 stars, but the next 2 books in the series I gave 3. So they weren't bad, they just kind of undercut my expectations. So that is why I'm getting rid of these 2. Next up is Who's Afraid by Maria Lewis, and I know that this is a werewolf story, so another urban fantasy. It's just a book that I've had for like years and I haven't bothered to get to it. So if I haven't got to it in several years, I'm probably not going to. And I have tried to get into it, but I just haven't picked it up. I've avoided it. So that just means that I don't want to read it if I keep avoiding it. So it's probably a good book or a decent book, but I'm just not vibing with it. So that's why I'm getting rid of it. Next is a book that my driving instructor recommended to me like years ago, at least 6 or 7 years ago. And it's The Alchemist by Poilo. Oh, I can never say this name, I'm so sorry, but I just don't want to read this. I've tried reading it, I've got like 10 or so pages into it, and it's just something that seems like it's very philosophical and very basic in its storytelling, but has ramifications when you think about the themes later. And I did a lot of literature study. That's what I did my degree in at university. And honestly, I just want to read books that I enjoy and that don't have necessarily a layered meaning anymore, because I'm kind of sick of analyzing stuff in that way. So I think I'm just going to get rid of this one. I'm sure somebody else will like it. I think it's a talked about book, so somebody else is bound to pick this up and love finding it at, I don't know, the Salvos or something. Next is Well Done These Men, and this is a book that's quite odd for me to have because I generally don't read war books, I don't read historical fiction, I don't read memoirs, and this is definitely a memoir. Barry Heard, the guy who wrote this, he came into my school when I was quite young and he did a talk to everybody, so this is actually signed to me as well, but I'm just never genuinely going to read this. And it's about him, and he's a soldier in the Vietnam War, and he goes through a lot of hardships, obviously because it's a war, but because when he came to talk to us as a school, I was the one in the audience who started crying. So obviously I bought his book, but I don't think I'm gonna ever get to it, honestly, and seeing him do that talk was enough. So I'm never gonna touch this, and it's just been sitting on my shelf for 10 years, maybe even longer, so I just need to get rid of it. Next are 2 books that I haven't read and likely never will, because again I've had them for years, and they are The Conjuring and The Wolf Wilder. I've heard decent things about The Wolf Wilder. I've heard decent things about The Wolf Wilder, but honestly these are just 2 advanced copies that a friend of mine was getting rid of, and I snapped them up because they were advanced copies. Now I know a lot better, and I only want to pick up books that I think I will definitely read, so getting rid of these just on principle because I don't think I'm ever gonna touch them, to be honest. Next is The Hazelwood, and I got this for review when I was doing a lot of blog posts and stuff, and it was like a fairy tale-ish book. It had those vibes in it at least, and I have a review I think on my blog, but I liked it enough at the time, but I'm never gonna reread it. I'm not really a fairy tale person unless there's a really cool twist, so that's why I'm gonna get rid of this as well. I'm sure somebody else will like it, right? Next is The Magicians by Lev Grossman, and I actually met him at a writers festival many years ago, and so I've avoided getting rid of this because it's signed to me. But I tried reading this, and then I think I got maybe to 100 pages, and then I stopped, and then I tried picking it up again, and then I tried picking up the audiobook, and it's just a story that I'm not interested in. It's like an almost academic writing level retelling of the Chronicles of Narnia. It's about this guy who goes through a portal and discovers that he can study and learn magic, and stuff starts happening and going wrong, and people start dying. And while that sounds like a really cool premise, it just didn't have enough, I don't know, tension almost. I'm not sure what is stopping me from liking this, but I think Lev Grossman's parents worked in academia, and so he's got that flair in his writing, and it just felt too wordy for me. It didn't feel as immersive as I wanted it to be. I know this is a TV series. I don't think the TV series is anything like the book. Maybe I'll try it out, maybe not, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to continue reading this. Next is another fantasy called The Queen of Blood. Honestly, I don't know anything about this except that it is tiny and I don't like this edition, so that's why I'm getting rid of this. I really don't like these editions. They're not, I don't like it. Next is The New Hunger by Isaac? Yeah, Isaac Marion. And this is the sequel, or the prequel that is a sequel to not World War Z, to Warm Bodies. And I love the movie, I love the Warm Bodies book, and I liked this actually, but I don't like it enough to keep it. Warm Bodies is about this guy named R, and he has become a zombie, but he's starting to get lucidity again. And so he's trying to kind of unite zombies and humans against this other zombie creature that is more mutated than him. There's a lot of moving parts in here, and there's a couple of characters that I liked, but maybe I'll read the sequel to Warm Bodies because I know that there's another book different to this one, because this is like a prequel that follows one of the characters in the trio or the cast that Warm Bodies has. So it's good, but it's not, you know, amazing, so I'm getting rid of it. Next, people might be annoyed at me getting rid of this one, but it's Circe by Madeline Miller. While I liked this, I didn't love it, and The Song of Achilles I liked more. Circe obviously is about the witch Circe who learns magic and gets banished by Zeus and has to live on an island pretty much isolated and gets visited every now and then by people that accidentally wash up on the shore. It had a decent premise, and I like mythology in general, so that's why I picked this one up, but it just kind of underwhelmed me in certain parts. I'm not sure if it was my expectations, the writing style, maybe a mixture of both, but it didn't rustle my rhubarbs, so I'm getting rid of it. Next is Rebel of the Sands, and this is a book that I read ages ago. Again, like the Mary Lou books, this was a book that I got when I was very early into YA, and this is a fantasy and it's set in like a sandy place, obviously Rebel of the Sands, and this girl is a sharpshooter, I think, and she accidentally becomes part of a rebellion to take down the royalty, or she joins up with some side that wants to rebel against something, and there's royalty involved. That is basically all I remember. It has been many years since I read this. I do have the sequel as well, Traitor to the Throne. I have no desire to complete the series, and so why am I holding on to this? So that's why I'm getting rid of it. It is pretty and shiny, but honestly, I can find other books that are pretty and shiny and that I want to finish the series for, so. Next is 2 Jennifer Fallon books, and they are The Liar Thief and Retribution. I can't say that word. And I want to keep reading this series, but I think I started in the wrong place for Jennifer Fallon, because when I read The Liar Thief, I liked it enough, but there were characters and events that were mentioned and I had no idea what was going on. So I think I need to go back and read some of her earlier stuff in order for this to make sense. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. So I could very well keep these and then revisit them later, but honestly, I don't feel anything when I look at them, so I think I just need to get rid of them and clear off my shelf space. Eventually, at some point, I reckon I'll come back and revisit Jennifer Fallon as an author in general, but at the moment I'm just getting rid of these 2. Next is The Diabolic, and this was actually a really fun sci-fi book. It's about 2, I was gonna say sisters, but I feel like one is a royal member and then one is like her companion, but the diabolic part is that she is called a diabolic because she's not human, and so she's a stand-in for this royal young girl, and so when there's like a demand made against this royal family for like a hostage situation, the diabolic goes instead of the girl. That is a terrible synopsis, but it's all I can remember. It says a diabolic is ruthless, a diabolic is powerful, a diabolic has a single task: kill in order to protect the person you've been created for. It was a lot of fun when I read it, but I'm never, like I said, gonna revisit this. Kind of a similar story to Rebel of the Sands. I believe that this has a sequel, maybe it's a duology at this point, but I've not kept up with it. I've only kept the cover because it looked really cool, so I need to get rid of it because it's just taking up my shelf space. Next is a book, oh, I just spoiled the book, but it's all the rage. This is one that I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I spoke about it in a reading vlog and a wrap up, I think this year, fairly recently, because I think I read it for a readathon. I don't really have much to say for this video except that I don't want to keep it. It does deal with topics like rape, sexual assault and bullying, so if those are triggers for you then don't read this, but I liked those themes in here, but I think the ending undermined one of the characters in the book, and that's all I want to say about it because I don't want to get specific. So I'm getting rid of it because I didn't give it a 4 stars, I didn't give it a 5 stars. Next is a book that's really pretty, but I've just never made time to read it, and it's been like 3 or 4 years, and it's Home Time, and this is a beautiful looking graphic novel. I think it has different stories in here that change art styles, but that's really all I know about it, and so I'm just gonna donate this to someone because I think this will be a wonderful find for somebody who's looking for a graphic novel to read, but to me it's just one that I've been ignoring, so I don't really deserve to keep it because it's not something that I've been interested in actively. So that's why I'm getting rid of this one as well. And then we've only got 2 more, so we're finally nearing the end. The next one is by George R. R. Martin. It's a compendium of short stories called Dangerous Women. While there are a bunch of authors in here that I really like, Joe Abercrombie to name one of them at least, and Brendan Sanderson as well, I don't want to keep this because I've read other collections of short stories like Rogues, and I'm not into short stories really, and I find that a lot of these stories are a miss when 1 or 2 might be a hit, and by a hit I mean at least 3 or 4 stars and not a 5. So I'm not gonna hold on to this because I cannot be bothered reading this giant thing. So it's gonna go to somebody else and they are going to take on this behemoth and be braver than I am. And then lastly is The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan. I talked about this ages ago in a wrap up, but I find Anthony Ryan's multiple perspective books to be very similar in terms of character voice, and so when I read this I gave it 3 stars because I couldn't distinguish the characters from each other when I was reading it, and that really impacted my enjoyment and it impacted my care factor about those characters. So it had a cool premise that drakes are kind of like dragons, but certain people can ingest parts of them and then have particular abilities, but if you don't have these innate powers and this innate way to respond to the potions, then they're poisonous to you. So it had cool perspectives and it had a decent magic system, but the way it was executed in the writing style, it just was something that disappointed me. So unfortunately that's why I'm getting rid of this one. But I know a lot of people like Anthony Ryan, and personally I did enjoy his other book Bloodsong, but I stopped after the perspective started to deviate from the main character. So it's just a problem I have with Anthony Ryan's writing, and I've decided not to continue his books because of that reason. So this is the last book on my unhaul. Oh my goodness, that was like 53 or 54 books. That was insane. I am glad that I finally got through those because they've been sitting around for a very long time. Thank you so much for watching this unhaul video. If you have unhauled any books recently, let me know. If you are thinking about unhauling books, go for it. It feels very therapeutic. But again, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you in the comments and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.